Choctaw and Chickasaw joined forces. The Creek War of 181314. The autumn winds of 1813 carried the acrid smell of smoke across southern Alabama, where the embers of Fort Mims still smoldered. 500 settlers and soldiers, men, women, and children, had met their end. In one of the bloodiest massacres in frontier history, the Creek warriors had painted the fort's walls with blood, leaving behind a message that echoed through every settlement: no one was safe. Welcome to Native Legends and History Stories, where we peel back the layers of time to reveal the raw, unvarnished stories that shaped America. If you're ready to discover history as it really happened, subscribe now and join thousands of others who seek the truth behind the legends. In the aftermath of the Fort Mims massacre, fear gripped the southern territories like an iron fist. Over 1,000 settlers had crowded into neighboring stockades Fort Glass and Fort Madison, their faces gaunt with hunger and worry. Colonel Carson, the military commander between the two rivers, knew their supplies wouldn't last forever. With Creek War parties prowling the wilderness between settlements, each day brought new reports of farms burned, livestock stolen, and families torn apart. It was in this atmosphere of mounting desperation that 19-year-old Jeremiah Austell stepped forward. The son of Captain Evan Austell, young Jeremiah had grown up on the frontier, learning its ways as naturally as breathing. He understood what others might not, that sometimes survival meant taking impossible risks. The mission seemed simple on paper: deliver urgent dispatches to General Claiborne at Mount Vernon. But in reality, it meant traversing 40 miles of Creek territory alone, in the dark, where every shadow might hide a warrior's arrow. The path would take him first to Fort Kearny, 13 miles as the crow flies, but far longer by the winding trails a horse could travel. From there, another 24 miles stretched to Mount Vernon, each one potentially his last. As darkness fell, Jeremiah mounted his fleet cavalry horse. The animal was chosen for both speed and endurance, qualities that might mean the difference between life and death. Before dawn, the young courier carried minimal provisions. Weight could slow them down, and speed was their only real defense. He wore moccasins instead of boots, knowing they would better muffle his horse's footfalls on rocky ground. The night wrapped around them like a burial shroud. As they set out, Jeremiah guided his mount with the lightest touch, eyes straining against the darkness, ears alert for any sound that didn't belong to the night. Every rustle of leaves could be a Creek scout. Every snapped twig might signal an ambush. The weight of the dispatches in his saddlebag seemed to grow heavier with each passing mile. Hours passed in tense silence until they reached the river bottoms near Fort Kearny. Here the darkness played its cruelest trick. Jeremiah found himself completely disoriented, uncertain whether the fort lay upstream or down. In that moment he made a decision that demonstrated the quick thinking that would later mark his military career. He would use the Creek's own tactics against them. Drawing upon years of frontier experience, Jeremiah led out a war whoop that would have done a Creek warrior proud. The sound echoed across the river bottom, cutting through the night air like a knife. For several heartbeats, silence answered him. Then, as if the very night had come alive, 50 dogs erupted in a cacophony of barking, the fort's unwitting sentinels revealing its location. The fort lay just half a mile distant. Jeremiah turned his horse toward the sound, knowing his gamble had paid off, but also aware that if any real Creek warriors were nearby, they now knew exactly where he was. He spurred his mount forward, counting on speed and surprise to carry him safely to the fort's gates. The inhabitants of Fort Kearny were initially alarmed by the war cry, and Jeremiah found himself staring down the barrels of several rifles when he approached. But recognition quickly turned fear to relief, and soon he was welcomed inside. The fort's residents gathered around him, eager for news from Fort Madison, and grateful that the war cry that had roused their dogs came from friendly lips rather than those of Creek warriors. After a warm meal and brief rest, both man and horse had earned it. They weren't allowed to linger long. The mission was only half complete. Under cover of darkness, they were ferried across the Tombigbee River, the cold water, a stark reminder of the perilous journey still ahead. As they emerged on the western bank, Jeremiah took a moment to orient himself before spurring his horse westward. They passed the Sunflower Bend like ghosts in the night, then skirted McIntosh's Bluff as the first hints of dawn began to paint the eastern sky. Finally, as morning light crept across the landscape, the walls of Mount Vernon came into view. Jeremiah had done it, covering 40 miles of hostile territory alone in the dark, without losing either his way or his life. When Jeremiah Austell delivered his dispatches to General Claiborne at Mount Vernon, the general's astonishment quickly turned to concern. The idea of a lone 19-year-old courier traversing 40 miles of hostile territory struck him as needlessly reckless. He immediately moved to reprimand Colonel Carson for failing to provide an escort. But young Austell stood his ground with remarkable confidence, explaining that his keen senses rivaled those of the Creek warriors themselves. More companions, he argued, would have only made them a larger target. His survival had depended on stealth, his horse's speed, and his own resourcefulness. The contents of those dispatches would soon spark a crisis at Fort Madison. General Claiborne's response, though intended as a suggestion, was interpreted as an ironclad order: abandon Fort Glass and Madison, retreat west of the Tombigbee to St. Stephen's. This French and Spanish outpost, with its formidable earthworks and embankments, was considered impregnable against Creek attacks. The news hit the 1,000 settlers at Fort Madison like a physical blow. To them, Claiborne's order felt like abandonment. Their crops stood ready for harvest in the fields. Their plantations lay deserted and vulnerable. The Creek warriors were already burning homesteads, driving off cattle, and in a particularly cruel strategy, driving settlers' hogs into the cornfields to fatten them for their own future feasts. The specter of starvation loomed over the community. Faced with this dire situation, 80 determined citizens made a bold decision. Under the leadership of Captains Evan Austell and Samuel Dale, they would stay and defend their homes. Even as 500 of their neighbors departed with Colonel Carson's troops for Fort Stevens, the parting was heavy with emotion. Families split, friendships strained, each group wondering if they would ever see the others alive again. Those who remained didn't waste time on regrets. They immediately set about strengthening their defenses with innovative solutions born of frontier ingenuity. Their most remarkable creation was a lighting system that transformed the fort's vulnerability at night into its greatest strength. They erected a 40-foot pine pole in the fort's center, surrounded by an ingenious scaffolding system with a central hole. This allowed them to raise and lower a platform loaded with earth and burning longleaf pine. This wasn't just any light. The fat, rich pine wood cast an intense glow that illuminated a wide circle around the fort's perimeter. Any Creek warrior attempting to approach under cover of darkness would find himself suddenly exposed in a pool of bright light, an easy target for the fort's defenders. The brilliant solution served another crucial purpose. It eliminated the need for exterior guards at night, allowing their limited fighting force to rest and remain concentrated. The technical sophistication of this defense system reflected the settlers' deep understanding of their situation. They knew they couldn't match the Creek warriors in numbers or mobility, so they leveraged their resources and engineering skills to create an impregnable nocturnal defense. The burning pine beacon became both a practical security measure and a symbol of their determination to hold their ground despite overwhelming odds. The defenders of Fort Madison were no ordinary frontiersmen. Years of fire hunting, tracking deer at night by the reflection in their eyes, had honed their marksmanship to lethal precision. Within the illuminated perimeter, the Fort Mims massacre had taught them a brutal lesson about underestimating their adversaries, and they had no intention of repeating that fatal mistake. The fort's leadership embodied decades of hard-won experience in Indian relations. Captain Austell carried 14 years of wisdom from his time at the Cherokee Agency in Georgia, where he'd worked to bridge the gap between two worlds. His son had been raised among the Cherokees, absorbing their culture and understanding from childhood. But perhaps most notable was Captain Dale, known to the Creeks as Big Sam, a man so respected in frontier lore that Judge Meek would later dub him the Daniel Boone of Alabama. These men commanded respect, not through military rank, but through their intimate understanding of both frontier life and Native American warfare. They had carved out homesteads in the wilderness with nothing but axes and rifles, establishing farms on the rich bottomlands between Alabama's major waterways. Their knowledge of Creek battle tactics was not learned from military manuals, but from years of direct observation and interaction. To see one of these frontier leaders was to understand their unique position between two worlds. They cut striking figures. In their practical frontier attire, buckskin garments, hunting shirts, leggings, and moccasins, each carried the tools of survival: a long, heavy rifle for accuracy at range, and a substantial knife swinging beside their shot bags. They moved with a distinctive combination of pride and caution, back straight, but steps measured. Eyes alert, yet seemingly passive, missing nothing while appearing to observe little. These 80 men who chose to remain at Fort Madison represented the finest qualities of frontier leadership when they proposed to defend their families against the Muskogee warriors. It wasn't bravado speaking. It was the quiet confidence of men who understood exactly what they faced. 2 weeks after Colonel Carson's departure, General Claiborne himself witnessed the precarious situation of the settlers caught between the rivers. His response was swift. Colonel Carson and his troops were ordered back to Fort Madison, validating the settlers' stubborn determination to hold their ground. O. Still's midnight ride, while perhaps less celebrated than Paul Revere's famous gallop, had proven far more perilous. Where Revere had ridden through settled Massachusetts in 1775, Austell had traversed wilderness, crawling with Creek war parties. The young courier's journey had set in motion a chain of events that would reshape the defense of the frontier. Daily life at Fort Madison settled into a dangerous routine. Settlers would occasionally risk visits to their abandoned farms, knowing Creek war parties roamed the countryside. They noticed a peculiar pattern in the raiders' behavior. Corn stored in field cribs was invariably burned, while stores kept in cribs near homes remained untouched, a detail that spoke volumes about the psychological warfare at play. On September 6th, this pattern of risk and consequence would be tested again. Josiah Fisher, a man who straddled both worlds through his marriage to a Creek woman, left the fort with his 3 sons to visit their farm. Located just a quarter-mile above Sizemore's Ferry on the Alabama River, their destination lay in territory where the line between friend and foe had become terrifyingly blurred. As evening approached, Ben Fisher worked in the yard, absorbed in the routine task of shelling peas. Without warning, a shot rang out. The bullet struck him in the back with devastating force. The sound of the shot mixed with cries of pain as Ben, through sheer force of will, managed to push himself up and flee into the dense woods nearby. Hearing the commotion, the elder Fisher emerged from the cane brake where he had been working. Moving cautiously in a stooped position to investigate the source of gunfire, he presented a clear target. A second shot cracked through the air. The bullet tore through Fisher's chest, exiting through his back in a spray of blood. As he turned to escape into the forest, a warrior's voice called out in Muskogee, the tribal language Fisher knew well from his years of marriage into the Creek community. That is the way to do it. The unseen attacker taunted, adding psychological warfare to physical injury. The 2 remaining Fisher sons, scattered in different sections of their field, heard the shots and their brothers' cries. They immediately abandoned their work and raced back to Fort Madison, carrying the grave news that their father and brother had surely perished in the attack. Dawn brought the first ray of hope when Ben Fisher staggered into the fort, his wounds still bleeding, but his spirit unbroken. The following afternoon, guards stationed outside the fort's walls spotted movement on the ridge road. A lone figure approached slowly, hunched over in what appeared to be intense pain. As the distance closed, amazed onlookers recognized Josiah Fisher, who had somehow survived his grievous wounds. Drury Allen, among those who went out to meet him, assessed Fisher's injuries with frontier directness. "Fisher," he declared, "I do not wish to discourage you, but you will die of that wound." Fisher's response revealed the stubborn determination that had kept him alive through the long journey back. "No, if it was going to kill me, I would have died before now." Fisher explained his painfully slow return to safety. Every time he tried to move quickly or stand straight, blood would flow so heavily from his wound that he nearly choked on it. This forced him to travel at an agonizing pace, maintaining a stooped position throughout the journey. Though he survived this ordeal, fate had not finished with Josiah Fisher. 2 or 3 years after the war's end, during a corn shucking gathering at his home, he engaged in what should have been harmless roughhousing with fellow workers. The physical strain proved too much for his old wound. A blood vessel ruptured and Fisher collapsed, dying instantly from the hemorrhage. The month held more dangers for the Fort Madison community. Moses Savell's mill, situated on a small tributary of Bassett's Creek, known as Savell's Branch, needed grain ground. A detail of 12 men was dispatched from the fort for this essential task. As afternoon waned and their work concluded, the group prepared to return. They left behind Phil Craig, a slave tasked with securing the mill, expecting him to catch up shortly on their return journey. When the party reached Fort Madison without Craig, concern grew. 5 days passed before he reappeared, bringing an extraordinary tale of captivity and escape. While finishing his work at the Mill Creek, warriors had surprised and overwhelmed him. They forced him to march along the Alabama River, traveling several miles below Lower Peachtree, where they had concealed a canoe. Using this craft, they crossed to their camp on the opposite bank, where Krieg discovered entire Creek families living away from their traditional territories. The treatment of slaves by Creek warriors differed significantly from their handling of white captives. Instead of facing execution, captured slaves were typically integrated into tribal life as servants, a practice well understood by enslaved people throughout the frontier. During his 4 days of captivity, Krieg experienced this firsthand. His captors fed him well, providing generous portions of venison and honey, the latter carefully preserved in traditional deerskin containers. Showing remarkable strategic thinking, Krieg gave no indication of resistance or displeasure. He appeared to accept his new situation completely, successfully deceiving his captors. With this performance, the warriors grew so confident in his apparent contentment that they left him in camp with their families during their daily hunting expeditions. Each morning the men would depart, never suspecting that their seemingly docile captive was carefully observing their routines and planning his moment to strike. After 4 days of observing the warriors' routines, Phil struck on the morning of the 5th day. He waited exactly 30 minutes after the hunting party departed, slipped silently to the riverbank, and seized their hidden canoe. His paddle strokes were swift and steady across the water, but as he reached the opposite shore, shouts erupted from the camp. The women had spotted him. Their alarm calls carried far enough to reach any hunters still within range. Phil abandoned the canoe and ran, knowing the warriors would soon be on his trail. He found a ridge path and pushed himself along it until his legs could carry him no further. Moving 50 yards off the trail, he concealed himself behind a fallen log. Within an hour, 4 Creek warriors rushed past. Following his tracks on the path, they continued forward, unaware their quarry lay hidden nearby. Phil remained motionless for another hour until he saw the same warriors returning, their pursuit abandoned. Only after they vanished completely did he resume his journey toward Fort Madison, reaching its gates safely at sunset. The fort's brief moment of relief was shattered when Miller hired 16-year-old Ben Arundel to harvest potatoes from his farm, situated 1.5 miles above Suggsville. Multiple residents, including Ben's own father, warned of Creek war parties recently spotted in the area. The teenager dismissed every warning, boldly declaring he was not born to be killed by an Indian. Miller provided his mare for quick travel and armed Ben with a musket and bayonet. Hours passed without the boy's return. His father, consumed by worry, mounted his horse and rode out searching. He returned alone at sunset, having discovered tracks of 2 or 3 Creek warriors leading toward Miller's farm. The crack of a gunshot shortly after confirmed his worst fears, forcing him to retreat to the fort rather than risk the same fate. Miller's mare returned the next morning riderless, having broken free during the attack. Lieutenant Bradbury's company found Ben's body in the potato patch. He had been scalped, his own bayonet driven through his throat. The Creek warriors had taken both musket and ammunition, leaving their grim message about the price of overconfidence. The company buried Ben where he fell and marched back to Fort Madison. This violent incident highlighted the fort's precarious position on the edge of vast Choctaw territories. Their lands spread across present-day Mississippi, from Wayne and Hancock counties in the south to Lime Creek and the Tallahatchie River in the north. The Tombigbee River marked its eastern boundary, while the Mississippi River and Bayou peered to find its western edge. The Choctaw Nation's relationship with white settlers stood in stark contrast to other tribes' hostile stances. For generations, they had cultivated diplomatic ties, with European colonists maintaining these bonds, even as other Native American nations chose resistance. By 1813, this policy of friendship faced its greatest test. British agents moved through tribal territories, offering weapons supplies and promises of restored native lands if the Choctaws would join the fight against American expansion. Spanish emissaries from Florida added their own entreaties, seeking to destabilize American influence in the region. Despite these persistent efforts at subversion, only the most isolated Choctaw communities showed any interest in abandoning their traditional alliances. The tribe's established leadership network proved crucial during this period. Indian countrymen like Pitch Lynn, whose trading network stretched from Choctaw territories to Mobile, provided steady counsel against rash action. LaFleur and Usen, respected voices in their communities, reinforced the benefits of continued American friendship. These leaders understood that their people's future security depended on maintaining reliable allies among the expanding American settlements. Throughout fall 1813, frontier settlements experienced waves of panic as rumors spread about possible Choctaw defection to the Creek cause. Settlers, still reeling from the Fort Mims massacre, saw potential enemies in every Native American movement. Multiple settlements went into lockdown, families abandoned outlying farms, and militia units mobilized on several occasions. These reactions, though dramatic, proved entirely unnecessary, as the Choctaw leadership never wavered in their commitments. The Choctaw governing structure reflected generations of sophisticated political evolution. The nation operated through 3 autonomous districts, known in their language as Fires or Alti. Each district maintained its own political, judicial, and social systems under the leadership of a principal Mingo. In the southeastern district, Pushmata's authority extended from the major trading routes to the boundaries of Creek territory. Pachinubi controlled the western lands, managing relationships with tribes along the Mississippi River. Mashalatubi's northeastern district served as a buffer zone between competing European and American influences. Within each district, a complex administrative system operated through 30 subordinate Mingos. These leaders combined the roles of captain, judge, and civil administrator for their assigned territories. They settled local disputes, organized hunting expeditions, managed land use among families, and coordinated responses to natural disasters or external threats. This system allowed for rapid decision-making at the local level while maintaining clear lines of authority up to the district Mingos. When matters affected the entire nation, declarations of war, major land cessions, or treaties with foreign powers, the 3 district Mingos convened a general council. These gatherings drew representatives from every Choctaw community to participate in the deliberations. The council system ensured that no single leader could commit the nation to war or peace without broad consensus. General Claiborne, recognizing the strategic importance of Choctaw support, dispatched Major Ballinger on a diplomatic mission in early August 1813. Ballinger's journey took him to Pearhausen Settlement, a key trading post, located between the Choctaw communities of Coosa and Chunky there. On August 15th, he met with Pushmataha to gauge the tribe's willingness to actively support American forces. The sudden death of Ballinger 3 days after this crucial meeting left many questions unanswered about the specific discussions and agreements reached. Pushmataha, widely acknowledged as the most sophisticated diplomat among the Choctaw leaders, saw beyond immediate tribal politics. His education and extensive experience with both native and European cultures gave him a unique perspective on the changing political landscape. Rather than merely maintaining neutrality, he envisioned the Choctaw Nation taking an active role in shaping regional power dynamics. This vision led Pushmataha to make a bold diplomatic move in early September. Writing to St. Stephen's, he met with Captain George S. Gaines to propose something unprecedented: the formation of dedicated Choctaw military units to fight alongside American forces. This wasn't a simple offer of warriors under tribal command, but a proposal for integrated forces operating within the U.S. military structure. Gaines immediately recognized the historical significance of this offer. He and Pushmataha rushed to Mobile to present the proposal to General Flournoy, only to face an unexpected obstacle. The general's initial rejection reflected the prevailing military establishment's hesitation to incorporate Native American units into regular Army structure. The citizens of St. Stephen's, gathering around Gaines and Pushmataha upon their return, voiced their outrage at Flournoy's short-sightedness. They understood that Choctaw military support could decisively tip the balance against Creek forces. The arrival of a courier at full gallop interrupted their protests, bringing news that would reshape the entire military situation. General Flournoy had reversed his decision, authorizing full recruitment of Choctaw units. This announcement transformed apprehension about potential Choctaw hostility into celebration of a powerful new alliance against the Creek forces. Gaines embarked on his mission to Choctaw territory, accompanied by Colonel Flood Mrs. Gruen, the chief himself, carrying only jerked beef as provisions. At Pitchland's house, positioned where the Octobia meets the Tombigbee River, they encountered Colonel John McKee, the Chickasaw agent. While the group held strategic discussions, Pushmataha departed to gather his people for a grand council. Within days, Gaines arrived at the council grounds to find 5,000 Choctaw warriors assembled. The gathering took place at Conchito Village in Neshoba County, 1.5 miles west of Yazoo, Old Town, chosen for its central location, accessible to warriors from all districts. Though Polk Shinobi attended alongside Pushmataha, Mashaladabi's absence was noted. A subchief named Tappanahoma joined the principal leaders. Pushmataha rose to address the assembled warriors. His words cut through the tensions of the moment with precision. "You know Tecumseh. He is a bad man. He came through our nation, but he did not turn our heads. He went among the Muskogees and got many of them to join him. You know the Tensaw people. They were our friends. They played ball with us. They sheltered and fed us whenever we went to Pensacola. Where are they now? Their bodies rot at Sam Mims' place. The people at St. Stephen's are also our friends. The Muskogees intend to kill them too." Drawing his sword with calculated dramatics, he continued, "You can all do as you please. You are all free men. I dictate to none of you. But I shall join the St. Stephen's people. If you have a mind to follow me, I will lead you to glory and to victory." The response came instantly. A warrior stood, struck his chest, and declared, "I am a man." Others followed, repeating the gesture and crying out in Choctaw, "Naknasiahokatailashke. I am a man. I will go and follow you." The thunderous response left Gaines elated. The resulting military organization reflected both Choctaw tradition and American military structure. Pushmataha received a commission as lieutenant colonel and raised for companies of warriors. The first company formed under Mingo Hopi, Prophet Chief as captain, and Tapanashtia, Rod Carrier as first lieutenant, with 51 warriors in their command. Slim King led the second company as first lieutenant, with Nukpala Chabi, the one who entices and kills, serving as second lieutenant. The third company demonstrated the integration of tribal and settler leadership. Edmund Fulson took command as captain, supported by a hierarchy of native officers. Redford as first lieutenant, Chekaba House above as second lieutenant, and Okayahama Red Life as third lieutenant. Their unit comprised 40 officers and warriors. Puck Shinobi and Tappanahoma also delivered impassioned speeches supporting the alliance, reinforcing Pushmataha's strategic vision. The gathering at Kansas Village marked a pivotal shift in Choctaw-American relations, transforming centuries of peaceful coexistence into active military cooperation. The warriors' enthusiastic response, shouting their willingness to follow Pushmataha into battle, demonstrated the chief's extraordinary influence and the Choctaw Nation's commitment to their American allies. The 4th Company under Captain Fluco, bearing rank of first lieutenant, mustered 12 officers and privates. Pushmataha led this combined force to St. Stephen's in early October. Reporting directly to General Choctaw Claiborne. Chief's arrival marked the beginning of a complex cultural integration within military ranks. At St. Stephen's, Pushmataha maintained strict protocols regarding his interactions with other officers. He refused to engage with any military personnel below the rank of captain, dismissing lower-ranked officers with a wave of his hand and the stern pronouncement in broken English, "I no talk with little Mingo, I talk with big Mingo." This adherence to rank extended even to social occasions, where he received invitations to every officer's dining event, taking his place among the highest-ranking commanders. An incident following the Fort Mims massacre illustrated his strict adherence to military hierarchy. While visiting General Claiborne's camp, a lieutenant on guard duty invited Pushmataha to share a drink. The chief responded with a look of pure disdain, refusing to acknowledge an officer wearing only one epaulette. When General Claiborne himself appeared, Pushmataha's demeanor transformed instantly. He grasped the general's hand as an equal, declaring, "Chief, I will drink with you." Pushmataha's attention to military social customs extended beyond official duties. Observing the evening walks of married officers with their wives at St. Stephen's, he dispatched messengers to bring his own wife from Choctaw territory. Each evening he and his wife joined these promenades, walking arm in arm, despite the quiet amusement their presence caused among the other officers' wives. The officers and their families carefully concealed their entertainment when the chief was within hearing range. His command style merged Choctaw traditions with military discipline, understanding that effective integration into American military structure required tempering the independent nature of native warriors. He enforced strict obedience to orders. His warriors underwent regular drills, followed American military protocols, and maintained the precise formation and discipline expected of U.S. troops. Meanwhile, on September 12, events in Nashville set additional forces in motion. Colonel John McKee, the Chickasaw agent, received urgent communications from Captain Gaines detailing the Fort Mims massacre. General Jackson immediately ordered McKay to return to Indian Territory with clear objectives: recruit maximum numbers of Choctaw and Chickasaw warriors, then launch an offensive against Creektown at Black Warrior Falls, where Chieftain Asiocha Mafla held power. McKee's arrival at Pitchland's home coincided with Gaines's party. Working with Major Pitchland's assistance, McKee rapidly assembled a substantial force of warriors. Within days of his arrival, he launched his expedition, creating a second front in the expanding campaign against Creek forces. The coordination between Pushmataha's disciplined companies and Mickey's newly recruited warriors demonstrated the evolving military alliance. Pushmataha's companies followed American military structure precisely, from command hierarchy to battle formations. His insistence on military discipline transformed a group of independent warriors into an effective fighting force, while his careful attention to social and military protocol helped bridge the cultural divide between Choctaw and American forces. McKee's expedition to the falls revealed an abandoned Creektown. Asiocha Mafla and his people had already fled. The Choctaw and Chickasaw warriors burned the deserted cabins before dividing their forces at Pitchlands. One group returned to their territories, while the other joined Claiborne's army at St. Stephen's. The diplomatic work of Captain Gaines and Colonel McKay brought powerful allies to the United States. Choctaw and Chickasaw warriors strengthened American positions across the Mississippi Territory, shifting military advantages in the Creek War of 1813. At Fort Madison, 40 settlers chose to stay and defend their homes rather than retreat to St. Stephen's. Their signal fire blazed atop a tall birch tree through dark nights, while their partnership with Pushmataha's warriors secured the surrounding lands. Native Legends and History Stories brings you these crucial moments in American history through original documents and first-hand accounts. Each episode reveals the strategic decisions, alliances, and conflicts that shaped our nation. Subscribe now to explore more authentic, historical narratives with us. See you in our next journey through America's past.